Giant bugs have been crawling across movie screens for a very long time, because apparently the lesson Hollywood learned early on was that if something has more than 4 legs, the obvious next step is to make it enormous. Now, giant monster movies didn't appear out of nowhere. King Kong had already shown audiences the appeal of watching a massive creature tear through a populated city, and The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms helped kick open the door for the atomic monster craze of the 1950s. But once nuclear paranoia really settled into American pop culture, Hollywood looked at ants, spiders, scorpions, grasshoppers, and basically anything you could kill with a rolled up newspaper and said, okay, but what if radiation made it the size of a building? And that's how we got movies like Them, the 1954 giant ant classic that James Cameron definitely didn't steal from. Wink. Then came Tarantula, the deadly mantis, the black scorpion, and a whole swarm of creature features where mankind's greatest enemy was usually nuclear testing, irresponsible science, or one guy in a lab coat saying, I'm sure it'll be fine. These movies tapped into real fears at the time. Audiences were living with the threat of atomic weapons, Cold War anxiety, radiation experiments, and the terrifying possibility that science might accidentally create something humanity just couldn't control. Also, they got to watch actors scream at oversized puppets, and occasionally what looked like someone's pet tarantula crawling across a tiny cardboard town, which honestly, pure cinema. But like most horror trends, the giant bug craze eventually crawled back under the fridge. By the 70s, 80s, and 90s, audiences had moved on to slashers, zombies, demons, serial killers, and of course, killer dolls.
¿Qué hables, maldito? De lo contrario te arrojaré al fuego.
A la verga, me vale verga, perro.
Apparently, people became more afraid of their neighbors than radioactive ants. That doesn't mean creepy crawlies disappeared completely. Movies like Arachnophobia, Slugs, and Ticks kept the genre alive, but they weren't really trying to recreate the old Atomic Age monster movie. The days of an entire town being terrorized by insects the size of Buicks had mostly been left in the 1950s. Then in 2002, Hollywood decided it was time to dust off the old giant bug formula, pump it full of early 2000s CGI, dump in a toxic waste spill, hire David Arquette for some reason, and unleash enough spiders to make Australia say, crikey, that's a bit much, mate. Now, the funny thing about Eight-Legged Freaks is that it didn't start as some studio executive randomly asking, what if we took Arachnophobia but made the spiders giant? It actually started much, much smaller. Before it was a Warner Brothers and Village Roadshow movie, before it had hundreds of CGI spiders, and before David Arquette was running around with a fake beard, it began as a 13-minute black and white short film called Larger Than Life. The short was made by New Zealand filmmaker Ellery LKM, who had been making short films since high school. LKM has said he deliberately wanted to make something with very little dialogue, because a mostly visual suspense film could travel better internationally, which is actually pretty smart. Screaming generally crosses over cultural barriers. For inspiration, LKM went back to the old Hollywood monster movies he loved. Them, Creature from the Black Lagoon, The Incredible Shrinking Man, and those 1950s creature features where science usually takes one look at nature and says, I bet I can make this a whole lot worse. That became fuel for Larger Than Life, a tiny old school monster movie about a spider exposed to a toxic substance, growing to ridiculous size and terrorizing a woman inside her house. Basically, Eight-Legged Freaks before Eight-Legged Freaks. But the clever hook was that LKM wasn't just recreating a 1950s B-movie. He wanted to combine that black and white, orchestral, old Hollywood style with modern computer effects. So it looked like a lost Atomic Age creature feature, but with CGI doing most of the heavy lifting. The short played at festivals and eventually screened at the 1998 Telluride Film Festival, where it got exactly the kind of reaction you want from a 13-minute spider movie. Audiences loved it, industry people noticed it, and according to LKM, after one screening he came out of the theater and suddenly had agents, managers, and Hollywood people handing him business cards. From there, LKM basically became Hollywood's new bug guy. His next project was a made-for-TV killer cockroach movie called They Nest, which didn't exactly light the world on fire, but did give him a pretty useful warm-up for Eight-Legged Freaks. The short eventually made its way to Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, who at the time were one of the biggest blockbuster teams in Hollywood. These were guys that weren't exactly strangers to the Atomic Monster movie, having just produced a remake of Godzilla a few years prior. And the timing was perfect, because Emmerich and Devlin were already talking about doing a modern version of the old 1950s B-movie creature feature. But the idea wasn't to make a cheap parody or pretend the genre was stupid, which is funny because they had the exact opposite approach when it came to Godzilla. No, they wanted to revive that style with better effects, bigger production value, and enough humor to make sure the movie didn't take itself too seriously. And don't worry, it doesn't. Then they saw Larger Than Life, and it was basically the exact thing they had been talking about. Dean Devlin later described the idea as taking LKM's short and giving it the resources of a full Hollywood production, or as he put it, dropping a Porsche engine into a Volkswagen. Emmerich and Devlin met with LKM and told him they thought there was potential to turn the short into a feature, but they didn't want to simply stretch Larger Than Life into 90 minutes. The short was suspenseful and stylized, but the feature needed to be bigger, funnier, and way more chaotic. Instead of one giant spider terrorizing one woman in one house, the movie would have an entire town being overrun by thousands of giant arachnids. LKM worked with Randy Kornfield on the story outline and later teamed with screenwriter Jesse Alexander on the screenplay. Their goal was pretty simple. The movie had to be scary, funny, and suspenseful all at the same time. Not full camp, but not exactly straight horror either. Eight-Legged Freaks was not intended to make fun of those 1950s monster movies, it was supposed to celebrate them. It understands that half of the charm of those movies is how sincere they are, even when the premise is completely ridiculous. According to LKM, the project spent about a year in development. Emmerich and Devlin had a deal with Sony at the time, but Sony apparently wasn't interested. So Dean Devlin took the project to his neighbor Bruce Berman, who was at Village Roadshow. Berman liked it. Village Roadshow brought it to Warner Brothers, and suddenly this weird little New Zealand spider short was on its way to becoming a $30 million studio creature feature. But not before the script got a little beaten up first. LKM has said that Bruce Berman was very blunt in development. At one point, Berman basically told them, "The script is a piece of shit," which LKM said was a bit of a culture shock, considering where he came from. Most people don't walk into meetings and professionally suplex your screenplay through a table. But Berman's issue was story. He didn't want the movie to just be effects and spider attacks. He wanted the characters and structure to actually work, because even in a movie about giant toxic spiders, you still need a reason to care when people start getting cocooned. So they kept developing it, rewriting it, and shaping it into something that can function as both a throwback B-movie and a modern studio monster movie. And then right before the movie got the green light, LKM had what might be the most on-the-nose omen possible. He was hiking in Topanga Canyon with his wife when they saw a tarantula crossing the path in front of them. LKM apparently looked at her and said maybe it was a sign.
Yeah, it's a sign, all right. Going out of business.
No, his phone rang. It was Dean Devlin telling him the studio had given them the green light. And with that, a 13-minute black and white short film from New Zealand had officially mutated into a $30 million studio monster movie. Eight-Legged Freaks begins with local conspiracy theorist Harlan Griffith, played by comedian Dougie Doug, broadcasting about whatever government nonsense. It's gotta be rough to go from bobsledding in the Olympics to being a proto-Alex Jones, though. Also, what's with the trope of movies having a black character who's also a crazed conspiracy theorist? The most recent Godzilla movies had one, and he was insufferable. I guess at least Dougie Doug here actually has some charisma and comedic timing. The film takes place in the fictional town of Prosperity, Arizona, which is a lot like the fictional town of Perfection, Nevada in Tremors. I'm gonna get this out of the way now, but there's actually a lot of similarities to this movie and Tremors. Anywho, since the movie has to happen, a guy carrying toxic chemicals is nearly run off the road by a bunny. Now, I don't know how things work in the good old US of A, but up here in Canada, if you see a bunny on the road, you're supposed to just run its ass over. I know, we're terrible people. It's not all sorries and maple syrup up here. One of the barrels of toxic chemicals falls into a nearby waterway, infecting crickets of all things. Not sure why it didn't create giant monster fish, but whatever. Also, if you're gonna have Tom Noonan in your movie and not have him play a villain, you're wasting Tom Noonan. This dorky nerd kid Mike visits Noonan, who's a spider farmer named Joshua. How exactly you make money raising spiders in a small town, I have no idea.
I see dead people.
He loves that movie.
Spoilers, Bird! I haven't even seen that movie yet! Joshua shows Mike his fancy new crickets, which look a lot like the ones in my backyard. These crickets seem to be making his spiders grow at an accelerated rate, which Joshua thinks is gonna make him rich somehow. Also, they spend so much time rambling, they didn't notice this giant tarantula escaping its enclosure.
They call this an Iraq attack.
Okay, so Iraq Attack was actually the original name for the movie, but according to some unconfirmed sources, the title was changed because it sounded too close to Iraq Attack, and the 9/11 attacks had only taken place less than a year prior. However, the name Iraq Attack was still used for releases outside of the US and Canada, so the whole thing sounds sort of made up. Joshua shows Mike a giant female orb weaver spider, which will definitely not act as the queen alien of the movie. Mike leaves because he's late and his mom is gonna beat his ass. But the second he does, a giant fluffy tarantula, which are generally harmless to humans, attacks Joshua. Those spiders somehow escaped before he knocked over their aquariums. A week later, Courtney Cox's ex-husband David Arquette arrives, sporting a fake beard for some reason. It actually becomes something of a plot point, but I don't know why he couldn't have just grown one. I guess the whole thing could have been a whole lot worse.
The question is, what are you doing out here? You were supposed to stay in the house.
Busted. Also, does he need a new father? Meanwhile, in The Dirt Bike Kid, Sheriff Samantha Parker pulls over some knuckleheads who might be endangering her daughter Ashley just a tad. But holy shit, can it be? Is that kid really wearing those pants with that jacket? Ashley tries talking to her boyfriend Brett over the phone, but her annoying brother Mike needs to call Joshua and tell him all about the toxic waste spill. Remember the good old days when everyone had to share one phone?
Come on, Joshua, pick up.
Joshua can't make it to the phone right now. He appears to be a little wrapped up at the moment. I'll see myself out. In the meantime, the town is having a meeting because they're basically completely out of money. I'm sure the scummy mayor isn't out of money. Some land developer wants to buy the town so they can turn it into something, but not everyone is willing to sell. Like Chris McCormick, who owns the mine that used to employ, well, everyone. You know, before the methane gas killed his father. Chris claims his father found a gold vein before he died, and I'm sure this won't be what saves the town from collapsing by the end of the movie.
He's a shade.
See, what did I say? His facial hair is a plot point in the movie. Later that night, Deputy Willis's cat decides to enter the drywall because it noticed something else went in there first. I don't know if you've noticed, but this movie doesn't exactly take itself too seriously. Watching this movie back, it feels not only like Tremors, but also Gremlins 2. Gremlins 2 was almost like a Looney Tunes version of the first movie, where the monsters were still real, but the violence and everything else was so cartoonishly over the top. It actually sort of amazes me that some people claim this movie to be scary, because it's one of the silliest things I've ever seen. Unfortunately, the kitty doesn't exactly make it, but don't worry, this movie seems to have it out for people's pets. Back with Sam, who gives her daughter a stun gun, you know, on the off chance her boyfriend gets a little too handsy. Chris shows up to try and explain his feelings towards Sam, but isn't this a giant spider movie? Mike finally makes his way back to Joshua's, only to find the whole place ransacked like he owed the spiders money. Also, it's a bit convenient there just happens to be an entrance to the mine right outside Joshua's back door. Are spiders known for roaring? I mean, I've come across some nasty hissing spiders, but never one that roars. Mike finds what he claims to be a spider leg, but I know an Aztec death whistle when I see one. He decides to hitchhike his way back home, telling me he's never seen unsolved mysteries. Before Chris has a chance to hide his body, Mike shows him the exoskeleton he found and explains his deadly spider theory. In the meantime, one of the miners decides to suck on a hose to unclog it. There has to be a better way of doing this, no? And how the hell did spiders get in the water line? Aw, the giant spider brings love. Mike tries explaining to his mother his crazy giant spider theory, but she thinks it's all the TV's fault. Why do adults always just assume it's the TV when their child notices something terrifying? Meanwhile, the mayor is talking very loudly when he exposes that he's being paid to allow toxic waste to be buried in his town. What? The mayor's corrupt? Well, that's unexpected. He better check on his ostriches though, because it appears they're running in day for night. Are we sure this is about giant spiders and not graboids? Harlan starts ranting about all the pets that have gone missing and believes it to be the work of aliens, which is so silly, because clearly it's the work of the chupacabra. Chris decides to go to the barbershop and get his beard trimmed, thus concluding the amazing beard arc of the movie. Though considering it was a fake beard, he probably could have just used rubbing alcohol. In the meantime, Ashley and her boyfriend are getting a little hands-on, but if you're gonna make this move, why do it in the middle of the day with all your friends riding around? Is he trying to put on a show?
Brett, back off!
A taser works fine, but if this were my 16-year-old daughter, I would have handed her a sawed-off shotgun.
Groovy.
I also like how she steals his truck. Have fun explaining that one, Brett. The spiders arrive, having used their spidey senses that a teen boy was getting a little too aggressive. Brett tries to warn his very early 2000s friend group, and I don't know what it is, but this guy's hair just annoys me. Also, why is everyone afraid of these spiders, when we all know jumping spiders are the cutest of all arachnids? The spiders take out a tanker truck, which in turn takes out the town's phone lines. Now, thank God for IMDb, because had it not been for this bit of trivia, I would have had no idea what was going on in this very complicated movie. Oh no, not Bruce! Now, apparently the reason so many pets die in this movie is because producer Dean Devlin was tired of hearing people complain about Boomer the dog surviving an Independence Day. So he's just like, screw it, now all the pets are gonna die. I guess killing off dogs and cats is one way of getting back at your critics. Chris returns to show his Aunt Gladys he got his beard trimmed, because that seems to be the most important thing happening in this movie, only to discover she's been taken by the spiders too. Chris brings a piece of the spider's exoskeleton to Mike, because it's always the kid who knows exactly what's going on in these kinds of movies. Meanwhile, Ashley is in the most early 2000s bedroom ever put to film. Hey, I remember POD. Oh no, she tore their photo. Now you know they're really done. Excuse me, Mr. Peeping Tom Spider, but she's 16. Go be a creep somewhere else. Thankfully, Mom knows her way around a shotgun. But if spiders really were this big, their silk would be like industrial cable. There would be no way Chris and Ashley would be getting freed anytime soon. Sam calls Pete and tells him to bring every gun they've got to her house. These spiders might be giant arthropods, but nothing some good old buckshot can't handle.
They're coming out of the mines right now to feed. We have to warn everybody.
Well, the phone lines are down, Mike.
Thank God for that IMDb post from earlier, or I never would have picked up on this. Pete arrives at Sam's house and one of the spiders crawls on the roof of his car, so he shoots it. But he doesn't know it's a spider. I mean, it just as easily could have been some rowdy kids, but he blind fires anyways. Mike is way too happy for a kid being terrorized by giant spiders. The group makes their way to Harlan since he's the only one with any means of communication, but I guess it gives him something to do finally.
Is being overrun by giant spiders. Now believe me, I know how this sounds, but you must trust me on this.
I love how even the conspiracy guy is like, a giant what? A giant tarantula shows up and it's so cute and fluffy. Don't you just want to cuddle it? So this is the part of the movie where the monsters overrun the townsfolk. Come on, kick its ass, Seabass! You know, the giant trapdoor spiders might be the most terrifying concept in this movie. Sam tries telling everyone to go to the mall, but I have no idea how anyone can hear her over all this chaos. Look, this spider's not even trying to get people. It's like if I was a spider. The townsfolk managed to get inside the mall, well, the ones that survived at least. But is this going to be like Dawn of the Dead now? You know, where the real monsters are the people?
What exactly is it? Spider-Man.
Why? The group decides the best way to get help is by broadcasting a message using the antenna on top of the mall. Chris volunteers along with Harlan, who wants to get revenge on what he thinks are aliens. Meanwhile, the rest of the townsfolk arm up to fight the spiders, though I don't know how a tennis racket would help. Chris and Harlan make their way to the antenna, but thankfully the spiders walk very slowly, giving them just enough time to call for help. At the same time, Sam ushers her kids to the storage room, since there's apparently access to the mines from there, but she has no clue the mayor locked them in, kind of like how Burke did in Aliens. Also, she has no idea there's even larger spiders down there.
Get ready!
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I can't wait for the sequel. Eight-legged freaks versus Jason. I don't know why they just sit there and watch the spiders bust through the front door. I mean, they've got guns. They could have been shooting through the holes, no?
Get back, you eight-legged freak!
So apparently this is something David Arquette improvised on set. The producers liked it so much that they would end up using it for the title of the movie. Well, at least over here. But I don't know, it never really felt improvised to me. Harlan uses himself as bait to draw the spiders away, while Chris thinks he's Indiana Jones or something, and let's be real, he's no Indy. The mayor runs into his stepson Brett, but is then immediately taken by the spiders. Oh no, somebody please help him. Everybody meets down in the storage room and are saved by Brett. I guess Ashley tore that photo a little too quickly, although he did nearly rape her. The group heads into the mine, though the camera keeps focusing on this nipply mannequin for some reason. A mannequin that can move on its own? Oh my god, it's haunted.
No gunfire! No gunfire will set off the gas!
We have to make sure everyone in the audience remembers there's gas, you know, for reasons. The group discovers the nest, if you will, which is actually kind of creepy, and unfortunately Wade has survived. I mean, if anyone was gonna die, it should have been him. I don't know if I would be standing around oohing and aahing, considering there's a shit ton of spiders that want to eat us. Chris sends everyone else out of the mine while he sticks around looking for Aunt Gladys. Not before he has a heart-to-heart with Sam about feelings and what have you. Could this not wait until after the spiders are blown up? Chris actually manages to find Gladys, could probably smell the cigarette smoke on her from a mile away. The giant orb weaver finally makes its appearance, though it's thwarted by the ending of Stephen King's It.
This is battery acid. Now you disappear.
Chris places a match on an exposed light socket, while Sam uses her daughter's taser to set off some matches, which gives us the typical Hollywood heroes running away from an explosion gag. You know, it's a good thing all the spiders managed to be in the same place at the same time.
They listen to my broadcast. We never miss a show. Where are the aliens?
I do get a kick out of the cops and firefighters showing up, simply because they're fans of Harlan's. The craziest part is the revelation at the end. Turns out the mine did have gold, and Harlan was the zombie DJ from Zombie 3 this whole time. Eight-Legged Freaks is a very silly, but fun throwback to the giant insect movies from the 1950s. Is it the best movie I've ever seen? No, but I remember being very excited for this when it came out, because goofy shit like this is exactly what I enjoy. I would have preferred if the spiders were treated more like a real threat, and less like cartoon characters. I mean, Tremors is one of my favorite movies, and it does a great job of balancing goofy characters with a pretty scary threat. The spiders make sounds all throughout the movie, and at one point, one of the spiders even sounds like Tarzan or George of the Jungle. It's really dumb, but it sort of works for the tone of the movie. Unfortunately, the movie wasn't really the big hit they had expected it to be. The movie only made roughly $45 million on a $30 million budget, and while I'm sure it made a decent amount on rental and physical sales, there wasn't enough to justify a sequel. A sequel was sort of in the works at one point too, with Dean Devlin claiming they were cooking something up. It would have seen the return of David Arquette's character and director Ellery LKM, but nothing ever materialized beyond these beginning stages. And unfortunately for LKM, this would basically be the beginning and end of his career directing theatrical films for Hollywood. From here, he would do a couple made-for-TV Return of the Living Dead sequels, which were complete dog shit, and a direct-to-video sequel to Without a Paddle. Was anyone really asking for a sequel to Without a Paddle? One of the funniest things I found was a review for the movie from Common Sense Media, which I guess is a site where parents can see if a movie is appropriate for their kids. In the review, it listed things like very explicit and gross violence, some alcohol and strong language. A teen girl is extremely clear about not being ready to have sex. But the funniest one is, one of the main characters is black. What? Why is this included? Now it does go on to say, and although he's portrayed as a little paranoid and crazy, he's also brave and loyal. Now that part is fine, but why was this included in the parents need to know section to begin with? What are we doing? Eight-Legged Freaks is a dumb movie, but I mean that as a compliment. It knows exactly what it is. It's a goofy early 2000s throwback to 1950s giant bug movies. I do wish the spiders felt a little more threatening at times. Tremors is still the gold standard for balancing goofy characters with monsters that actually feel dangerous. But for what this movie is trying to be, I still have a lot of affection for it. But if you've already seen it, what do you think about it? Let me know down below. Anyways, that's all for today. I hope you're doing well and stay spooky. Huge thanks to all my channel members. You're the real MVPs of the Spooky Squad. Your support helps keep the lights flickering and the monsters fed. If you'd like to join up and help support the channel, check out the join button below. But no pressure, just watching and liking helps a ton too.